I'm not fond of introductions that are long lists of accomplishments. And Shirley Sherrod comes with a very, very long and deep list of accomplishments, spanning from her days as an organizer for SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee in the 60s, and the Civil Rights Movement, all the way through decades of economic development work in rural areas. So I'm going to forego the list, and instead of telling you what Shirley's done, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Shirley is. So we got to know each other in the 90s in the watermelon trade, when two food hubs separated by 2,000 miles discovered they had overlapping missions and purpose and the need to get into business. Shirley's working for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives and the South Georgia Farmers Cooperative. I had just launched Red Tomato, trying to figure out what fair trade means locally and in produce. And so together, we found a way to move truckloads of watermelons into supermarkets in the Northeast. And over those years, I learned a few things about Shirley Sherrod. She always shows up. She's always there to do the job, whatever it is. In the race between the hare and the tortoise, Shirley follows the plotting, strategic, long-term path of the tortoise. She's in it for the long term. Slow and steady wins the race. Shirley doesn't know much about that word, no. She's kind of fixated on that word, how, and still is, always will. And so over the years, I have grown to greatly admire and respect this person. But she wasn't in it for the watermelons. One of her roles today as the co-creator of the Southern Rural Black Women's Initiative for Economic and Social Justice, active in 77 counties in Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi over the past 14 years. That is emblematic of what she's in it for. That's the prize she keeps her eyes on. Please welcome Shirley Sherrod.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. You know, Michael gave me a difficult task. He said, I want you to speak in two parts, at the beginning of the day, and so how do you break up half of it so that you do the rest of it at the end of the day? But that's the task he gave me. So I have to try to figure it out. Let me just tell you a little more about where I came from. I grew up on a farm in Baker County, Georgia. And when you get the time, just Google Baker County, Georgia, and learn a little more about it. It's still known as the state of Baker. White people in Baker County felt that they didn't have to answer to anyone and had their own rules and so forth, and it's somewhat true today. But, you know, we had to fight that during the 60s. But growing up on the farm, picking cotton and picking butter beans, which was worse than picking cotton to me, and doing some of the other work there, I would look at the sun, because I couldn't talk to anybody else about it other than God, and say, you just wait till I get out of high school. I was going to get as far away from anything that had anything to do with agriculture as I could. I had no intention of living my life in the South. I had this strange sense that people in the North were free, and that's where I was going. And I said I'd never have anything else to do with agriculture, but you can never say what you'll never do. During my senior year of high school, my father was murdered. He was murdered by a white farmer who was not prosecuted because an all-white grand jury refused to indict him. So I made a commitment on the night of my father's death. You see, I'm the oldest of what is 6 children now. My mother was pregnant. My father wanted a son. I had to deal with this with my own son. He and his wife have had 4 daughters. I said, are you trying to do what my mother and father did? So they stopped. But my mother and father kept trying. They had 5 girls, and don't misunderstand that. My father loved his daughters. We all had boys' nicknames. I was Bill. But he wanted a son, so during my senior year of high school, my mother kept getting sick, and I didn't know what was going on. And at school one day, my best friend asked me, how was my mom? I said, she doesn't seem to be getting any better. She said, girl, your dad was at the store yesterday giving out cigars. Your mama's gonna have a baby. And he told everyone it was the boy. In fact, we were getting a new home, and he was having a special room prepared for this son. He was so happy. He didn't live to see my brother's birth, but it was the boy. So there are 5 girls and a son at this point. So on the night of my father's death, I kept thinking, I have to do something. My thoughts were all over the place. Our house was full of people there to try to comfort us. But I went into one of the bedrooms. We had just moved into the new home 1 week before he was murdered. And I was praying and asking God to help me figure out what to do. And the thought just came to me that I could give up my dreams of living in the North and stay in the South to devote my life to working for change. I didn't know what I would do. I was only 17 at the time, but I knew I would do something. And the answers came when members of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee came to Baker County to help us start the Baker County movement. And I wish you could have seen how people came off those plantations where they had every right to be afraid, because that's where they were living, that's where they were working. But it seemed that with my father's murder, and many others had been murdered in Baker County by the sheriff and other white people, it looked like it finally brought everyone together to say no more, that we have to stop this now. And the Gator, who had a really tight operation there, you couldn't ride through Baker County without being stopped, and he collected a lot of money on the road. In fact, around 67, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution estimated his take on the road to be about $150,000. Now, there were lots of plantations there. The biggest, 33,000 acres, owned by Robert Woodruff, who was chair of Coca-Cola. 25,000 acre plantation owned by the Mellon family, still own it. Woodruff left his plantation as a research facility. But with the help of SNCC and the black and white people who came to work with us in the civil rights movement, change happened. So during the civil rights movement, we took the battle on with nothing but ourselves. Nonviolence was our weapon. Dr. King once said, nonviolence is a powerful weapon and a weapon which cuts without wounding. And it ennobles the man who wields it. Nonviolence is a sword that heals. Nonviolence, a sword that heals. It was the power of the people. And if we're going to build a just food movement, and Carolyn, I think we can get to the point where we call it that. I hope. Then it's going to take all of us searching ourselves and figuring out what we can do individually and together to really build that movement so that it's not just a few who benefit from it. It's not just a few who lead it, but it's us working together. And that's not easy. And I hesitate so much in talking, but see, I know that we won't get there if we can't talk to each other, if we can't put the hard, difficult things on the table for each of us to deal with them. You know, we had this racial healing project in Albany. Really, really tough. White people who came into the group said all of that stuff is in the past and we just need to go forward from here. But how can you go forward if you don't look back? I think we need to look back for the lessons that are there. We need to look back so that each of us can be comfortable in moving forward. So I hesitate a lot of times because I don't want you to think I'm here to cause problems. I'm just here to try to provoke you to look deep. You know, and when we look deep, we can walk out of this well together to make the change that need to be made. And it's, you know, I mentioned earlier the situation with IFFS. Some of us in the room remember that, and it was a tough time in our development. And I can remember they brought this person in who had started Visa, the credit card company, D. Hawk, and he had developed this process that he called the chaotic age. And he was going to help us change agriculture in this country. And Dee decided that he needed a small group of people, not the roughly maybe 100 or so, or a couple of hundred who were involved in the IFFS. So he's selecting a small group of people to work with. And when they selected that group, I remember that they were in Denver. I missed that meeting. So when we got to Michigan, and what everyone realized, I think there were 5 people and they were all white. 1 white female in the group. So the group started discussing and saying, you know, we can't have this. And they insisted that I become a part of the committee. Now I had to really allow myself to be put in that position, because y'all have to know that wasn't an easy position to be in. This whole group is trying to get me on this committee, and D. Hawk has told them, you don't have to worry about diversity because the process will take care of it. And I have to tell you, that was a special meeting one night of the whole group to make a decision about whether or not I will become part of this smaller group to work with D. Hawk on this system that's supposed to change agriculture in this country. So I had to sit there while we went one by one around the room with people saying whether they wanted me on this committee or not. And everyone else except the 5 were saying yes. So then the 5 had to say yes or no. But they had been indoctrinated by D. Hawk already, so they didn't want to say yes, because he told them, you don't have to worry about diversity, the process will take care of it. Can y'all imagine how I was feeling sitting there, having to go through this? So finally, one of them said yes, another said yes, and it was reluctant. It was slow, but finally, all of them said yes. So the next step was to get me to the next meeting out in Half Moon Bay, California with this group. So we all met at the airport in San Francisco and rode in a van down to Half Moon Bay. And then we had dinner. And I'm talking about discrimination Black farmers were facing. And one individual in the group is having problems with that, really not thinking I should talk about it. But why shouldn't I? Because that's what we were experiencing. And I was experiencing it again in this situation. So the next morning, we met at this, it was either a 4-H center or something, and D. Hawk drove up in his little 2-seater Mercedes. And so they, everybody said, I had to be a part of this group. So we're all nice to each other, but I was really, really struggling inside, and no one else in that group realized the struggle I was going through. And I'm trying to figure out, how am I going to deal with this? I can't sit here and talk with these people as if I'm not affected at all. And none of them were understanding. So we sat down and being nice, and they want to do the check-in. I hate check-in. But they all checked in, and I still hadn't said anything. What I was doing was in my mind, because I can't let this go. We have to talk about this. So I'm watching the fog come over the mountain there as I'm listening to them, but I'm real torn up inside, because I can't just let it go like it's going. So finally, I had to talk. And I said to them, before I can check in, we have to have a discussion about why none of you wanted me here. I think it took D. Hawk by surprise. We had some times over that time where because I had to deal with this, not just then, but I had to deal with it throughout the time I was working with this group. And then you get to the larger group, and we still didn't have many minorities involved. And I said to them, as we worked, I don't remember how long, maybe 3 years, I can't remember. Dee got mad with us at one point because I wouldn't give up on trying to make sure we were intentional about including minorities. He could, right up until the end, he said the process will take care of itself. And I'm thinking, in what world is that? Certainly not in the world I live in. It's not going to happen unless you're intentional about it. So throughout the time I was working with that, no one knew the struggle I had through it. Some of you probably hear me for the first time really talk about how difficult it was to to have to be a part of and not a part of. And I guess I'm saying this to you and sharing this with you because you're the good people, you know, but as good people, you have to realize there's a part you need to play in helping to bring that change about. And those of us who are people of color need to help you understand and help us understand what's necessary. See, it won't happen if we don't talk to each other. It will not happen. If I can't get to know you, and you can't get to know me, you don't know what I'm feeling inside. And no one ever took the time to really know what I was feeling inside because I was expected to perform at a certain level, being a part of this group, and act as if none of that stuff that I was dealing with existed. I shouldn't have been put in that situation. But you know, we grow. All of us, I think, I don't know what we got out of that, because we certainly didn't change the system. and Kellogg made a major mistake in giving the money to D-Hawk to work with us. They should have given the money to us to get us to work with him. So it put him in a position of authority and gave him the control that he really didn't need. And we didn't get anything out of it. I don't think he got later on when his book was coming out, he felt because he gave up on us, and I think he blamed me a lot for that. Because I insisted throughout the process that you have to be intentional about having minorities at the table. And whatever system you develop, it's got to keep that in mind. But he held to the very end. And just let me quickly tell you, at the very end, he got angry because we didn't do what he was asking. And he sat at a table and turned his back on us and talked to the rest of the group. And then we had a break because he was giving us a chance to make a decision quickly to do what he wanted. So let's go to lunch. And I was so upset that I wouldn't go to lunch with the rest of the others. I had to walk around. And I wondered if all of these years of working together, anything had changed. So when we came back together and he asked us, what's your decision? I was quiet. Because I had told the others throughout, I'll know we've made a change when I'm not the only minority, when everyone's not looking at me for an answer to all of the minority issues. So they said to him, we decided to keep it like it is, which was being intentional about having a minority at the table. I felt we had bridged the gap. We had moved forward some. So I wanted to, I know my time is about up for this part of the discussion, but I wanted to give you that example to say we really have to be intentional about what we do. We need to get to know each other. And when we do that, I can be concerned about you and the issues you're concerned about. And you can be concerned about me and the issues I'm concerned about. And when I can sit across the table and look in your eyes or look at your expression, I kind of understand where you're coming from. And we can use that to build a movement. Thank you.